Thank you very much. Item 1 is apologies for absence. No apologies. Did you get through to Councillor?
I did. She has said that she's not able to send going to email and pass on the apologies.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'll take that as an apology for absence from Councillor Judith. Okay, but she's not going to be here. She's coming.
She's going to email you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, okay, we'll go to that 1 second. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any members have a disclosable pecuniary interest they would like to declare? No. Very good. Item 3 is minutes. Councillor Judith has put in a request in a second. Does anyone else have any other comments on the minutes that were circulated before the meeting? Councillor Judith has raised an item with 1 line, which she just sent the email late this afternoon. I haven't had the chance to read it, but it refers to a comment she made about planting of trees and whether people had sued the council about it. She'd like to amend that. So I'll discuss that with her. So subject to that line potentially changing, is everyone happy for me to sign off the minutes? Yeah, okay. So we'll pick up that at the end of the meeting, if that's okay. Thank you. Right. So item 4, first substantive item, is the update on CREST. The Customer and Resident Focused Environmental Services Transformation Programme, for those who don't know. Thank you, to officers, Councillor Kamali and Councillor Well, across both your areas for presenting this report. Would you like to say a few words about it?
It's a bit of a double header tonight. As you said, it does cross both of our portfolios. This is obviously a paper to talk about sort of where we go next. I think there are a lot of positives to be reflected upon within the work that's already been done, not least sort of recent changes to the FPM policies. But actually, it's just good practice. All of our council staff should be talking to one another. They should be acting when they're out on the street in the interests of residents. Obviously, my stuff sort of is more the waste and the sort of construction side, and then Emma's do with the wardens. I'd say it is working well, but it can obviously be done better. That's sort of what the paper says. But
I think that's it in a nutshell.
Is that it?
This is about how we can do it better. I mean, the wardens aren't fully integrated currently with the rest, and that's one of the things the paper talks about. And essentially, we've got a lot of uninformed people, which is good, and we just want to. It's really about looking at that again to make sure that it's the best from that we're getting proper bang for our buck. Really. So that's a really sophisticated introduction for me, but that really is, and I think the paper's, I think there's a lot of information on it there. So it's how we take it forward and really have to ask questions, and obviously, and Lucy here as well, who've done all work.
Yeah. In fact, I should have said at the start, because we'll all know, but for anyone, do we have the camera working today? Yeah. Anyone else who might be watching, we've got Sue Harris, who's the Executive Director for the area responsible, and Lucy Bourne, who's CREST Programme Manager. Yes. Thanks for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Very briefly, just to confirm, partly to introduce Lucy and sort of confirm that there's a lot that's already been done, as the lead members have already mentioned, but we specifically invited Lucy to come back to do a bespoke piece of work to explore beyond the £750,000 that we saved previously and the joining up that we've already done. What are the challenges going forward? And so, Lucy, I don't know if you wanted to spend a couple of minutes, obviously not going through the slides because everyone's had a chance to read them, but highlighting A, the challenges, and then B, potentially the sort of key learnings that you've come out and produced in this report for the council period of time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lucy, before you do that, one thing I should have said, which Lucy just reminded me, is Gemma and I were very explicit that while there may be cost savings that arise from this work, we were very clear that was not the purpose.
Mm.
The thing is to make sure we have the best service. We've got a lot of people who want to getting the best out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, with a front facing, that's quite important to residents. We know these areas are important to residents, so
Mm.
just want to underline that.
And then it's cost
Sorry,
savings
sorry,
could
no worries.
presumably be reinvested in.
Exactly, yeah, but that really wasn't,
Yeah.
this is not a saving exercise.
Great, thank you. Well, so as part of this work, I've kind of reviewed some of the data that we've got in terms we've gathered from sort of the teams, because we have now got a joined up data from all the FPNs, etc., and activities that teams do. I spoke to all staff, and I also looked at all the resident feedback that we've had across the piece in terms of citizens panels and other consultation exercises. And I've sort of pulled together here in this pack where we've got to. Our vision, just to remind everyone, was to join up community engagement and environmental enforcement services and to enable staff to do more. So an officer to not be walk past something, basically, to be able to deal with something as they come by it. So I think we've gone a long way to achieving some of that, but we do fall short in some areas, and that's what we're thinking about in terms of the next phase. In terms of we still do have a lot of dedicated individual teams doing specific kind of tasks. We could do that better, join that up across services more, and they do sit in different kind of parts of the department as well, which makes a common leadership and a common approach challenging. So part of the next phase, we want to look at that. We don't work across estates. There's still a very separate situation in when it comes to sort of ASB on estates and their housing. And we're reviewing sort of what the spend is in relation to the HRA, etc., across there, and whether there's more joined up working across estates. We also want to look at improving the reporting for residents. That was one thing they were keen on doing. And also we've had a new CRM in Kensington and Chelsea as part of the next phase of the programme. We've made sure we've got more, detailed requirements in there to be able to have residents interact better with our system, get more updates, be able to add further information to their reporting. So we want to do that. We want residents are wanting, in terms of the review, they are wanting more of a visible presence. So in terms of this next phase, we'll be looking at how we get people out on the streets more proactive, patrolling, not so sort of reactive, and how we get that common presence, sort of as Councillor Will was saying, making everyone feel like there's as many people as possible on the street and they're visible, and residents can kind of see that we've got people out and about on the street. We have had some challenges with recruitment in the warden service, and I think some in waste and streets and enforcement. That's not unusual. I think everyone's experiencing some of those issues, but in terms of this next phase, that's a real sort of benefit if we can join up further and get more for our money and more resilient by joining up some of these teams further. It's definitely a positive step. So the challenges are all listed on slide 6, or page 16 in your pack. I will literally just flip to page 21 in your pack as well, which again is my review of some of the community safety and environmental issues that residents have raised. And on the right hand side here, this is what we're incorporating into kind of the next phase of the programme, which I've touched on most of those just a moment ago. But just to sort of say, our residents are saying they want more visibility, they want more enforcement activity. So as Councillor Kamali was saying there about increasing some of that sort of enforcement-led approach, and they do want us to invest more in resources and have more people out and see more people out and about on the streets. And we are, Councillor will know this too, that we are thinking about bringing My Local Bobby starting on Monday to help us fill some of those vacancies, which will be a 3-month kind of pilot to see how we can work potentially with external agencies to support some of our enforcement activity going forward too. And so then just on to page 28, just briefly. So this is kind of shaping up what the next phase would look like. And again, just in summary about bringing together the teams further, across the different parts of the directorate and broadening the remit of officers, so creating potentially a more sort of multi-skilled role, and looking at maybe more training, more police-focused training as well. And as I've touched on, the whole My Local Bobby, how we use external companies and NSL as well, who did a pilot for us a couple of years ago, how we might bring them into the environmental enforcement space as well. And we are moving towards one common back office system as well, so we hope to be supported by IT in moving towards Netcall, which some of our services are already on. By extending that out to the rest of the Crest services, we'll get quite a lot of benefit in terms of that sort of one view of the data and getting more information on patrolling and activity and all of those kind of elements. And as I sort of said, looking at the customer reporting side of things as well and improving that through the CRM programme. So that's it in a whistle-stop tour. So there was a number of questions posed in the report. We have considered other boroughs in this as well. So we've got slides on here in Hammersmith and Fulham and Westminster, also to Southwark as well next week in Newham. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of boroughs do have a more joined up approach than we do. So there's definitely lots of learnings we can take from other places as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the report, which is very detailed and it's very interesting to read. Colleagues, who would like to start? Yes, Councillor Deary.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Lucy almost answered all of my questions to some extent, but I'll try to pose sort of what was in my mind anyway. I'm hoping you just confirm it, which is probably sufficient. So at the moment, we have broadly many different enforcement, think about it that way, teams across the council. Obviously, many of them will work effectively under different legal what's the word I'm looking for? You know. So essentially, they have to implement different types of legislation. They have to work on different frameworks, so which are obviously very different. It's a different skill set. Obviously, some will gain experience over time as well, in particular the skill set, which I think is quite important.
Yes.
I want to be sure we don't lose that. But on the other hand, it is the vision essentially to get to the point where we have multi-skilled enforcement staff who will be familiar broadly across legal frameworks, be they planning, uncanny, like all the various different things, legal uses and so on.
Yeah.
And also be highly visible on the street, so very commonly identified RBKC uniform, able to be out and about, clear to residents that they're representing RBKC and they have some powers. Is that essentially the vision that we want to try?
That is, but I think as you sort of touched on there, we don't want to lose all specialists.
Yes.
So it's not a case of all of these teams into one very generic role. There are two particular teams that we have that do cross over across Councillor Kamali's Councillor Will's area, the Wardens and the Waste and Street Scene Enforcement team, that I think do have a lot of commonalities and do share a lot and could definitely have a more of an integrated single role between those two. Some of our other teams, I think we need to take time to think about how we feed in. There are lots of boroughs that do include parks police, but that's not necessarily what we want to do in Kensington and Chelsea at this point in time. Other places like Westminster don't include parks police, so it's not that everyone does that. And also things like noise and nuisance. I think the learnings from other places are you always need some dedicated support in a noise and nuisance service for those more complex cases. You don't want to make everything completely generic. So yes, I think we can do more in a more generic role, if that makes sense, but it doesn't mean absolutely everything put into one generic role.
Okay, no, it sounds good. The other question I had was about the external providers. So I'm all for bringing in minor body. I know Molly discussed that as well. That's great. I'm just wondering how we'll make sure that staff employed by this contractor are essentially well briefed to recognise that they are in effect representing the council, well, as far as residents are concerned, and they need to be trained and skilled in the same way that our own members of staff would be in terms of how they interact with residents and so on. Has there been consideration given as to how that will be implemented and also enforced?
Let me say something, and so Lucy. So this is something that we haven't done lightly because for the issues you mentioned, but it's just been so difficult to backfill. We've been so short staffed on wardens, and so the way it's being approached is very much as a pilot. And one of the big wins for us, and Rachel Merriman, for those of you who know her, is very, very particular about all of this stuff, is that they've agreed to wear our uniforms, which actually is, was viewed as quite a big win. And Rachel is very clear about what the role is, and that's why it's only for 3 months, because it may be that they're brilliant, or it may be, as you say, that they it's just not the right fit culturally, and that they're trying to do something, or they're not right with it. And so it really is. We often call things pilots and they won't be pilots, but this really is a fun. I have no idea. I hope it works, but if it doesn't, we tried and it's not worked. So, but I'm encouraged by what I've heard from Rachel and Sue may know more about how they're prepared to sort of do what we want them to do.
Yeah, my understanding is that they've been extremely cooperative, and I think we've had a fairly detailed meeting.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think they're going to receive obviously all the KNC kind of exec training, etc. But yeah, they seem willing to do whatever we. I know exactly what to say. No, I don't mean it like that. But you know,
Rachel is quite
yes, she is,
particular. I mean,
Can we make sure, this might already be the plan, but as part of the pilot, we get them to pilot sort of different roles, because there are different things wardens do.
Yeah.
And it might be that actually my local Bobby fits in very well for monitoring sort of busy areas on a Friday night. That might be more of their traditional, I mean, that's where I've seen it before. But less good at sort of dealing with antisocial behaviour at Earlscourt Tube Station, for example. I don't know. So I think it would be good if we didn't, it wasn't necessarily a yes or no, but we looked at the different areas and said, okay, they might, maybe they'll be great and everything. But they won't work here, but could perform a more limited service for us for the specific thing.
I think they're all ex-police, and so we may find that they naturally have a slightly different. But I think it's that was my reaction, to be honest, because I think that's what residents want. I think they want. I think part of the,
As long as they haven't been
if I'm
fired
being
from
really
gross
candid,
misconduct.
I think if I'm being really candid, part of the struggle with the wardens is that residents want them to be more like police, and they're not police, and they don't have those powers. So if we have ex-police being more like police, maybe that will please residents. They still don't have the powers, but maybe the whole.
Well, citizens arrest is a thing.
Well, there is that, but maybe they'll be more police-like in their manner. I don't know. What
Just
we'll
to
have to see.
conclude, I think maybe just think about recruitment. If we do get to the point where we do have this essentially multi-skilled role, that in itself may help
more
recruitment because it's a more interesting role.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, just one more point, because I was going to ask later, but it makes sense to bring it up now. How are we getting on with the warden team, the current warden team, with their integration with the police? Because it seems that's very important. And just what you're saying about my local body, one could see how that might be an easier integration if they're ex-bodies. But how is that going so far?
So again, my understanding is that I think there's always room for improvement, and I think it inevitably depends on individuals. So I hear some very good things, but then I hear where it's not working perhaps as well. Where I think it has worked well is up in Brompton Handstown, where we have, I think, police, my local body, and there's quite a lot of resource there. We're close together, but is that fair, Sue?
It is, and there are joint tasking meetings weekly, and that really helps as well, where we share data.
Yeah.
And so much more joined up working than previously. And again, the where we're bringing in bids and it's mine of the body or others, then all of that is now getting we're sharing data as well.
Okay, well that's positive, and maybe at a future meeting would be good to get a bit more information on that. I don't know how you would measure a particular metric, but I just sort of feel that linking in, because as you say, residents want them to make arrests, which unless they make a citizen's arrest, they can't do. But if they're closely linked with the police, they can very quickly call the police over, and then one could imagine how that could be.
There has definitely been some good job. Funny enough, in particular, I was called in those 2 months. I think there was a lot, but there was a lot of. They were there a lot, both police and wardens. But it's a good point how we measure that.
Just on that point.
I'll just go quickly to Councillor Retty and then.
Emma, you just brought up about the wardens. I just want to find out about the metrics that you mentioned in page 19. It would be good to see wardens against ASB, because that's what really come up for residents,
Against, sorry.
antisocial behaviour.
Oh, God, sorry, yes.
Not obviously
Yeah,
part
yeah.
is an essential thing. I think it would be also to ask you, so the data that you provided based on the metrics, is that resolution or is that identifying bedding or safeguarding or rough sleeping?
It's a mixture, to be honest. It's people where they've resolved it, service requests, or where they may have actually noted down
Noted.
action.
Yeah, it would be good to have resolution because
Yeah,
yeah,
that really
yeah.
counts, not
Yeah,
not
Cool.
requests.
yeah.
That one and wardens against ASB.
Yeah, we don't,
Yeah, because that's fundamentally the big issue that come up. with
yeah, the
residents.
problem is there's different types of ASB, you know.
Well,
so-
then you can have a breakdown of ASB. If you can, if you
Yeah.
have the data.
Because graffiti is actually ASB,
Yeah.
but it's not, but
Mm.
it's not managed. That's why I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be,
Yeah, I think
I mean, part,
graffiti, yes.
but you're right, under the parts belief it is separately,
Yeah.
so well, we take that away and have.
If you have the data, it would be
Yeah.
great to get.
No,
Yeah,
sure.
of course.
We've got all the numbers, that's how
Definitely,
Yeah.
that's how we present it, yeah.
And one final question. In terms of the legislation, sorry. What are we allowed to have night wardens or is it too risky or? I don't know.
We can have,
We
like,
can.
yeah, lots of boroughs do, so,
Okay.
because Hammersmith does have a night version, so do Westminster, but in terms of the sort of feedback though, they say that it's not actually particularly resource effective during the week, but the weekends, they're busy, but to have a night team on other days of the week, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, is not particularly efficient. But yes, there is definitely something maybe there is thinking about my local lobby and other
Oh,
external support on those weekend
Yeah.
evenings. That could
Fridays,
be something to
Saturdays.
I
explore.
really want to have a trial for at least a month maybe
Mm.
to see how, not during the week obviously.
And do you have a particular place in mind?
But
Because again-
I don't across the borough.
Yeah, no, the reason I ask is in the same way that certain days of the week are busy than others. There are
Yeah.
certain, a back street in somewhere, can't think of, anyway, at the top, there are back streets where I'm
Back
in
streets.
Stanley, probably there'd be nothing to do, but, High Street Ken, King, Hollywood Road, I could see.
We'll always put forward Hollywood Road.
Yeah, no, but,
Good
so,
place to send more resource.
I think there are certain places where you could see them might be
Yes.
quite busy and other places where honestly, poor things, they'd be,
Cross the road.
Portobello, Cross the
Yeah.
Road, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
I,
thank you.
I think in terms of the resident confidence, if we can have a trial and then put the data out and it's really working, then, we can do that as a
Maybe,
regular
maybe it'd be possible to incorporate.
If it's
that
not
into
working,
the
then-
Monday
Yeah.
Bob
Yeah,
Dylan
definitely, this is
If
great.
it's not working, then we can tell residents, look, we had a trial.
Yeah.
This is the outcome. So,
Can we say this, that we get Michael Bobby and see whether it's working at all, and if it is working, then we have a discussion with them about
yeah.
doing an evening pilot.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably it will cost more because you have to pay more at night.
Yeah, no, I
Yes.
get that.
Can I add, is it possible, I know you're not meant to be saving, but you happen to be saving quite a lot, can we employ actual police so then they can actually do stuff?
I think we did
It's
this.
funny you should ask that. So because we have struggled with the recruitment, I've obviously been thinking about how we manage this problem. So as I said, we have now agreed to do Michael Bobby, but literally in the last week, I've also had a conversation with the police about what it might cost, or if there's even an offer available, which to take, and so we are literally starting that conversation. I'm definitely looking at that, and it might be that we end up with a mixed economy of wardens and a few extra police. What doesn't exist anymore? So before your time, if I can put it that way, Laura, because you said that. We used to have a buy one get one free deal with the Met. So we used to have, how many police were we supposed to have? Was it 12?
Oh, yeah, I thought 14.
It's about 14. And it didn't work in the end because they kept basically we were paying for them and we weren't getting what we needed from them. So we stopped it and then the offer ceased. So that's why we've moved towards the warden system, but clearly that's not quite delivering either. But now that the police officers a partial might be back on the table, and it seems, and it's, I think, potentially affordable, I'll definitely look at that again. But I think what we wouldn't want to be doing is having 14 police, because I think they just pinch them all and send them elsewhere again.
Yeah.
So I think we're we're looking at
I
all
know.
the different options really.
I know from sort of my experience with my local area and the police and stuff there, they're always saying that they're understaffed and they would like extra help. So obviously that's why I'm like, well, maybe.
Absolutely, and in fact, I had probably the best meeting that I've had with the borough commander in the whole time I've been in for this week. As you know, there's a lot of changes going on the Met, and there does seem to be a genuine focus now on neighbourhoods. We're going to have a dedicated borough superintendent for the ward, which we haven't had. We've had one shared. We're going to have our own one. There will be, he doesn't know how many, but he expects he will have more police. I mean, maybe, who knows, maybe two. It does finally, it's been quite, I've felt quite depressed about the whole situation for some time because the police have been in such a mess. But I finally, Elizabeth and I thought, that was the best meeting we've had. So I'm hoping we will get more resource for them and I'm looking at us having some too. So, sorry, long-winded answer.
Councillor Wheaton sends us one more question on wardens, and I want to try and move on to
Yes,
other
sorry.
Chris. We've got another 3 papers as well, but Councillor Wheaton.
I'm going to squeeze a lot of things into my one. Firstly, Knightsbridge Grid on their weekly bulletin do list all the plans that happen. And so I don't know if there's a best practice thing or a way to see what it is they're doing. There might have all getting be plugged into the police. But it might be just good to go away and because I think that's very just from an awareness point of view. Secondly, I'm interested just on the offline, buy one get one free. My understanding had been our contract when Councillor Gardner had done the portfolio. My understanding was we put in a clause to say that they wouldn't be called away unless until everybody else had gone.
But I gather it. I wasn't like.
It didn't work.
It didn't.
They were
So
sort
the
of,
offer's
they were
not
just
on the table.
Yeah.
being abstracted.
well, I guess it's the opposite of Notting Hill Carnival when we take everybody else's police to come here.
Yes, exactly that.
And then the two other sort of very quickly, just on the resident community safety thing and enforcement. I think actual enforcement is definitely an issue that comes up regularly, so it's good to see that's highlighted.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, are there any incentives that we provide to encourage officers to use their enforcement powers to their maximum ability? I know some councils, I think, there's some sort of benefit to the number of tickets issued type thing. And I think,
Percentage of all fines.
yeah, well, there's some sort of way to encourage those to rifle through the waste and make sure that there is no ID. I'd like to just on that. And secondly, it was sort of following up on Councillor Retton's point about night time. I think it's something to weekends as well. And particularly on waste, there seems to be a lack, and that's when a lot of people are walking around from outside the streets. If something gets dumped on a Friday, doesn't get picked up till Monday, it gets reported. Often the response is, but we haven't had time to, there's been no one on the shift to look at it. Could you just comment on, sort of staffing numbers and rotas on weekends as well?
So one of the advantages of having everyone on the same rota is clearly that will be dealt with more quickly. So that's one of the advantages. On the performance-related pay, that's something that was removed from the workforce a couple of years ago, and we'll take it back to HR. But I think that could be a bit tricky.
How do other councils?
What have performance-related pay?
Or incentivise them.
Incentivise
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah. So you can do it in lots of ways, and I'll take it back to HR. But because it's been removed from all the workforce, I'm not sure it's
Yes.
immediately implementable.
It's a cultural. I think it's a cultural thing. It's not a. I think we need to employ and encourage the staff to.
There's a bit of a hesitance.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing. And actually, I think again, it could be where the minor may be interesting. They may be a bit more.
I mean, interestingly, we were looking at some of the data on wardens today, and there's one person that's done something like 1,500 actions, and then the next one on the list had done 700. They're doing the same job, technically, but it was just interesting to see that there is that sort of eagerness among different officers.
I think it's cultural.
Give
Could
that
that-
person a raise.
Yeah, could that
He's
person
local
maybe,
as well, apparently.
could maybe that person be working like, you know, prime time, so like at the weekend, maybe they get all the
I
good
think we
stuff.
want all of them functioning at the same level.
Yes, and as I say,
So maybe that's a more general request, but there's the point on sort of HR and what is possible. But if that's not possible, it'd be good to get an update at some point. How are we going to get all the people up to that
So
level? I mean, there's a good simple example with the bins. I mean, every bag that is misplaced should be rifled through. I do it. It's not the nicest job, but it's got to be done. People think it's quite strange, but anyway, that would be good to have an update.
we'll do that, and I would stress that performance management is really important. So even though we don't have performance-related pay, it's very important that data that Councillor Kamani was
Absolutely.
talking about, we are looking at, and then supervisors have those discussions.
Absolutely.
Obviously, sometimes an interaction can take a day and a half, and someone else might be able to get through 5 because it's very simple interaction and resolution. So you can't always just go by numbers.
Yeah,
But
no. It's good that we have that data and dashboard, internally shared dashboards is what one's very well implemented.
Chair, if I might, I think it's a really fair challenge, and I think it would be really helpful if we came back in a few months' time and we looked at the FPNs. I think there's probably there's a balance. We don't want to upset residents
Yeah.
or we're being
Yeah.
too overzealous, but I think what we've done, and actually with the Earl Support pilot, is that residents appreciate this doing a bit more actually. And I know we feel that way too.
Well, I'll get Councillor Noor and then Councillor Derry.
I mean, some of points have already been mentioned, but one thing I seem excited is the lead person for each one. I think that's encouraging when it comes to reporting issues. It goes across different, the departments. And that would be really good if those contact details can be shared to the board level, associations, tenant managements. Because at the moment, to report an issue, sometimes it takes a week rather than hours and days. But I mean, that's a welcome, I think, opportunity and how it works.
And again, one of the challenges we have at the moment is, Lucy referred to it earlier, is the IT and getting much better at people being able to report, the officer receiving that instantaneously and then being able to take action and report that. So it's really not acceptable.
That's you are, I think,
No, go ahead.
what we avoid doing is sometimes we don't want to collect, the lead member or yourself. We just want to do, the official level. Sometimes it doesn't work. And you have to really escalate after a few days to be higher. So having a lead person contacted me.
For each ward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think it was always the aspiration with the wardens as well that we'd have a warden for each ward, so that residents, they'd have a relationship and people would know who to talk to and they'd get information, and that is still very much the plan. So I think it's a really valid point.
So,
Thank you.
just because we're on IT, I'm going to jump in here unless your questions are
I
answered as
think
well.
Emma kind of made my point for me. I'll just be cautious about how they implement and incentivised, unfortunately. In case it kind of goes too far the other way. It's far too many college schools.
I think point well made. So yeah, on the IT, so on the slide, technology and data opportunities, page 25. Benefits seem significant and self-evident, and quote from the slide. Not just will they be able to work more closely together, but environmental health, structure management, parts police will be fully mobile rather than having to come into the office to record information, which can be more time out in the streets. Answers to ongoing questions. Yeah, okay. And then, yeah, brings together everyone on the street. Anyway, the benefits self-evident. And it says it's been discussed for a number of years, and then without success. And then also on the customer-facing reporting systems, again, something residents talk to me about it. Abdullahi's mentioned it, but again, it's something that's been discussed for a number of years without success. Why? And the blocker seems to be the IT department. What's the issue there, and how are we going to overcome it this time? Is it too much work?
Well, I think then we're now obviously coming sovereign, aren't we, the IT services? I think there was always seemed to be last time I was here when we were a shared service, there always seemed to be this conflict between driving everyone towards a common system between Westminster and KNC, because that was most efficient and effective from an IT point of view, if you see what I mean, versus what services needed and wanted and prioritised. So potentially now that we've gone more sovereign, it does feel there's a bit more flexibility. But I think resource has definitely been an issue too, because across the council there are so many IT projects, so many priorities. It's about prioritising, as a council, what are our key requirements and priorities, because I think sometimes the IT service do feel, they get from all departments, it's all several priorities. So we probably need to manage that better as well, I think. But I think becoming a sovereign IT service will
be helpful.
Will definitely be helpful, because I think there was that whole drive to use the same systems as Westminster, because that's a more efficient way of operating. Whereas now it's more about the services.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, my committee would agree with me. But from my experience, sort of managing day-to-day IT is a certain amount of work, and then to go through a whole IT transformation project can be, more than double the amount of work, and so it's probably unfair to expect the people who manage day-to-day to manage this huge transformation project. And a lot of organisations underinvest in IT, and it seems to me is really central to the ability for press to do their job. So, although it goes beyond the remit of this committee, so investing, getting IT transformation consultants in if necessary, is definitely something worth considering.
I think, there's even just in my own areas, we've got a planning website from 1989, I think. The parking website, seemingly not from many years after that. There's some really big well-used resident services that we have to get right perfectly. I appreciate if we can get a really good IT on this as well, hopefully more residents will use it. But when you've got 20,000 parking renewals going through every year, you want to make sure that's as slick and as easy as possible. And planning applications, all of us as councillors will know, when you try and find a document, we spend longer on our website than anybody would want to. But that's something that deals with 7,000 applications a year. It has to be pretty efficient, and this is something that I think, as long as we've got the people out on the street dealing with the problems, I think we can probably manage in the interim whilst we sort out the sort of back end as to how we shoot.
Absolutely. I'd add to that breaches of construction as well, reporting that. It's something come up to me regularly from residents. It's hard to report and to follow the case. That's helpful. I've got one more line of questioning. If you'll indulge me. The part, double question. It's about what's out of scope. So parking wardens are out of scope, and I can understand why you wouldn't want parking wardens also being wardens. There's a certain, probably unfair cultural barrier with parking wardens. People tend not to like them, so getting them to enforce the peace could be difficult, but surely they're the perfect people to report waste issues and idling, because they're on the streets the whole time, walking up and down. So is that something we could look into?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we've been speaking to Andy Bernard in parking about he's going to have a conversation with NSL about that, and about how we might be able to join up more in, at least, like you say, being the eyes and ears, some of their officers being a bit more eyes and ears out there for us. So absolutely, as part of this work, we'll definitely incorporate that, discussions with NSL in doing that. It's definitely part of this.
Okay, well that's fantastic.
I would just caveat slightly that I was with the construction team 2 days ago. I've been out with the traffic wardens before. It is a job of efficiency, and any wrinkle in their efficiency obviously has implications from what they're able to do. Not to say that it's an impossibility, but that a traffic warden's hours are quite well spent at the moment, and we want to make sure that we don't detract them from the day job in effect, unless we sort of backfill to make sure that there's actually more wardens out in principle to cover that stuff.
But if they're just, again, it comes to efficient software, doesn't it? They're just, so they're already geolocated, they just press there's waste here. It takes 10 seconds, potentially, if the RT's right. Anyway, fair point. And then on housing, also scope, and there's a suggestion that, there's not funding right now. But I don't fully understand necessarily why we need additional funding if there's already offices allocated for the ASB and housing. Why would you need additional funding to integrate that into the broader program?
I think it's more about, for a lot of boroughs, they contribute HRA funding to one big service that covers estates and, the whole of the borough.
Yeah.
I think, at the moment, housing, they do have kind of different arrangements on different estates. They explore contractors like Park Guard, they've got their own contract with another company called Vigilant, etc. And it was just about, well, is there an opportunity to repurpose some of that ASB related funding that they have in housing into a borough-wide service that works across the states, or are we? It might be that we're happy with that more mixed economy type approach, and that estates potentially remain separate. It was just that's a sort of opportunity to invest in that more common borough-wide service that is across both estates and neighbourhoods and streets.
But those conversations have stalled with housing?
No, they haven't stalled. It's just a case, it's a bit of unpicking around. And so what I'm trying to do with them at the moment is unpick all of what they spend around ASB, so that, we have a clearer picture about where that spend is, because it does vary by estate quite often as well. So, just getting to the bottom of that spend, and then, there's not been a, no, we don't want to do this. I think they did a pilot with our wardens in early days in Lanc West estate, and that went very well. They thought it's just that we didn't have the people and the bodies for the service to continue that. So, it's just seeing how
so it's just a bit more complicated, but we are progressing.
Yes.
And actually, probably worth clarifying that the wardens' housing has always been out of scope for wardens. So the job of the wardens has never been on housing estates. That's what's been start. So those, you could argue, those wards that have a lot of housing estates and not a lot have had. It's been a different mix there.
Happy if we move on to the next page. Thank you very much. It was spent a lot of time on that. There's a lot to get through. So appreciate your comments and answers. And just say, I think we broadly, as a committee, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong, we agree with the direction of travel.
Brilliant.
And the options presented. But just on those actions mentioned, it'd be great to send some more information. Right. So we now move on to. Oh, sorry, we're going to, I should have announced this at the start. Apologies. We're going to, Emma.
We do the back update.
Back next,
which is,
and then,
it's here, so that's.
My apologies, sorry, I should have announced that at the start. We're going to do go forward to Biodiversity Action Plan and then come back to air quality. So agenda item 7.
I'm going to keep this brief because really you will recall that the main back came to you and you will have hopefully a very useful discussion about it, but that we undertook to come back and just sort of update you, because it's every day is different. I mean, there were a lot of actions, 84 actions, so it's really just updating you on all of those actions. It's very much work in progress, and Dr. Alice is who's leading on it and making great progress. He's here to answer questions, so I think I'll just straight over to you, all of you, really. And
Great.
thank you, Chair, for letting us.
Not at all. Well, thank you, and thank you for the paper updating us. Colleagues, questions? So I'll start. So yeah, couple of things. So one is on involving sort of younger people in the borough, and a few updates on that, which is great. But I was wondering particularly, I think with the ecology service, said that it might be difficult to work with youth clubs due to the sort of timings. I know my local youth club, Earls Court Youth Club, I'm chatting to the manager there, and their younger kids arrive at 4 o'clock. So, and they're very keen to engage with the ecology service. So it'd just be good to have another go with that. And I know Almanar's mentioned, which is great. But also I think Earls Court Youth Club and maybe reaching out to a couple of the others to see if we can get some more link up there.
Yeah,
Is that okay? And then also on that, I'm pleased to see the development of new kitchen garden space. Again, it would be great whether it's schools, youth clubs, even nurseries, whether we could reserve some space for them or at least offer them some space. Is that a possibility?
Yes, so we have the school food grade programme,
Yeah.
which is a separate thing, and just emailed all the LEA primary schools in the borough, particularly keen to, with a questionnaire basically, to see how can we help. Do you have space in your own school where we can do a food growing programme with you? Do you, so we're kind of waiting to collect all those results and see basically what schools like.
Okay.
We do have some community gardening beds. So we have one is used by Rugby called Hello, one is used by Grenfell Kids.
Okay, well that's fantastic. I just think, and it's an very urban environment we live in. There's chance of people having space in their own homes is very low. So it's, if we can offer things to kids getting into gardening at an early age, that's great. So if you any sort of big developments there, just if you could let us know as and when, that would be fantastic. Councillor Nutt.
Thank you, Chair. I think on the point of the community gardens, we know there's a lot of green spaces at the back of housing estates. For example, you mentioned here Almanar. There's a lot of spaces which needs attention. But I'm really keen, as the chair said, involve the youngsters. Because when you involve the activities, gardening, food growing, it diverts them from being not doing nothing and being antisocial. So they will engage. Not only that, they will love the area because they will grow the trees and I'm personally involved by personal capacity on St. Charles Community Garden. And some of the children who go to cemetery schools, after school clubs, do grow food. So it will be really good. I mean, I'm more than happy to volunteer my time in Goulburn Road, which when I walk around, I see a lot of empty spaces, especially Warrington Green Development area. There's a lot of the empty spaces, which sometimes attracts, the illegal dumping. But if the place is, the green, fit for use, then we will not tend to grow rubbish.
We have, so when we look at putting in a new kitchen garden, there are quite a few things to consider, obviously access, resident consultation, but also things like having a water access point. So we really do have to have a tap on site, and that can be an issue in quite a few sites. We do have, our portfolio at the moment is about 57 community kitchen gardens. About 5 of those, sort of the engagement's really fallen off, and we've got a new staff member about to start next week. So we're going to be reviewing those and doing some more resident engagement, but it might be that they're suitable for a more community-based beds rather than individual plots. That could be an option.
And do we have the capacity to bring on new ones? Do we feel we've surveyed everywhere, or would it be happy to have a good idea to have an information campaign, maybe involving councillors?
So we have 5 requests for new sites currently on our radar that came to us through the residents and the leaseholders meetings last year.
Okay.
So our community gardeners are currently like reviewing those sites
Yeah.
with the various people that manage
Okay.
them and looking at options.
And did we make them aware that that was an option? Or did they just
They
come
came to us.
Okay.
So the community gardeners, I think, very well known in the borough. They get everyone sees them around about, or they know if there's a garden on their estate.
Okay.
And our website's recently been updated, so all our contact details are there, and they're also on the notice boards at every community garden. It's our email address on, so people we get constant stream of people being in touch.
Okay. Fantastic. Yes.
So as you said, some of them sort of fall off, so what's the effectiveness and how can you reignite that passion, or what happens with them? Do they just
People come and go, and
then what happens
So-
with the space?
Sure. So most of them in our portfolio are up and running and very busy, and our waiting list is so extensive we could refill we've got about 650 plots. We could refill them again with everyone on the waiting list. But in turn, we do have a few that have fallen off. There was a bit of a combined effect of the project is now about, I think, 12, 13 years old. So the life of the sleepers, I think we brought this up at the last meeting that we're looking at other material options that will be more longer lasting. So we've gone through a period this last year of quite major refurbishments of quite a lot of them that need a lot of replacement for damaged, sort of just through age. That combined with COVID, obviously people weren't coming out. It's been a long process to get people comfortable to come back out into the gardens, and people moved away, things like that, plot holders stuff. So the ones that have fallen, where the engagement has fallen off, they are generally the smaller sites, and also we've been very under capacity in our team. So we've had just one gardener managing the whole project for the last 4 or 5 months.
That was good. Sorry to interrupt. That was going to be my next sort of follow-on. At what point do you realise that they've actually fallen off? I mean, obviously you can see it when it's all derelict, but is there a monitoring system so you're kind of aware earlier to rectify any problems rather than having to restart?
Yeah, sure. So I took over the management of this project in April. So it's been a bit of a gradual process, reviewing all the processes surrounding it, and we've had staff changes, like I say. We do now have an asset register in place, and we've got, with our new member starting on Monday, we've been going through renewing so we can plan ahead and, like I say, keep a tighter eye on what's going on. And now we have more staff. The idea is that they'll be much more able to be on the ground in the gardens, which is where they're needed, where they're most valued, and that we can rotate around more of the gardens more frequently, and that should help.
And we'll go Councillor Concerns then. Councillor.
Just change the on the green infrastructure plan, Kensington High Street. Can you give us an idea, a bit of sort of timescales for that, and what goes for that first?
So it went out to a tender last Friday. Sent it out. I'm reviewing the responses to tender with them on the 14th, and then see what comes of it. It should be a relatively short project, so assuming we get a good applicant, I anticipate that the project would be completed June.
And then from that, we'll be implementing.
Yeah. So the outcomes of the brief are firstly to come up with kind of a toolkit that we can apply to other areas in the borough to do this sort of green infrastructure, not an audit because our planning department have already done the open spaces audit, but pulling all the data in sort of a desk-based study with a bit of a gap analysis, and then coming up with solutions that would work, that can be applied to the space that we're looking at. So the second half of the tender is then to come up with short and long-term solutions that could be applied in the bid area.
And have we looked at any other sort of high streets or other case studies that might have done this already, and what they've done? Are we doing that, or are we sort of remaking the wheel on some?
We're not remaking the wheel, no. And in fact, this week, Natural England launched a new green infrastructure framework, which has a design toolkit. So definitely not trying to reinvent the wheel, but trying to see how it can be applied here.
Councillor
Yeah, it's a follow-up, the community gardens. I know it's been over 10, 11 years. Are we, the equipment they use, like, the forks and the stuff like that. I'm just referring in particular the one in Central. Things do disappear. It's not the thing it's called. Because it's not locked. The other complaint people have is, the one they grow, especially the kids, the fruit and veg, you got mental unit just opposite the garden, so we are walking. And sometimes it's quite upsetting for the youngsters. I'm not suggesting to be locked, but they need to come out and enjoy that environment. Also, I think providing compost and what they need, seasonal, because sometimes it comes to a financial element where they're not able to buy what it costs, to grow the stuff.
Yes. So we do provide compost to top up the beds as and when needed. We provide that out of our
Funding for community gardens.
yeah, out of our budget. In terms of equipment lost as well, if gardeners let us know what's missing, we can certainly replace that equipment. And in terms of the other wards in St Charles, some of the secure wards have sensory garden at Shannon Ward, so we do work with them to do planting, making some bulb planting as part of the big bulb plantings.
Thank you.
Councillor Ressi.
Yeah, last question. Hi,
Hi.
how's the caging going?
I knew you were going to come.
How's the what going?
No, that's a secret. That's
It's not to people.
This is originally Councillor Ressi, everything's transparent.
the Sweden Poland man.
Is that your question?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the rest is referring to the peacocks.
It is the peacock.
It is the peacocks.
Something I don't want to hear.
At the moment, England is still under an avian influenza prevention zone, which means that all kept birds have to be caged. So we couldn't introduce any more at this current moment. We're primed, ready to go, but we have to wait and review what DEFRA's guidance is.
I'll get it.
The ones that are there look beautiful at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
They may just come back in, they look amazing.
You can't just sneak an extra peacock.
No, or certainly don't let me know.
Yeah. On the local plan, and so I think in the new local plan is it larger applications like biodiversity net gain.
At least 10% and 0.4 on the EGF.
Okay, so yeah, my question was around the process for that and how we measure it, and how we make sure there's not just sort of window dressing but actually meaningful things.
Yeah.
All work for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to be a big piece of work this
Yeah.
year, yeah. So we've put in the local plan that I will be drafting in supplementary planning, colleagues in planning. So basically we need to thrash out all these details. So in terms of the actual biodiversity net gain, so we need to, major developments will have at least a 10% net gain requirement, delivered on site, optimally. How that's calculated is developers, there's a metric that DEFRA have created. So you basically take the habitat you're creating, it has a value attributed to it. So woodland has a very high value, permeable woodland has a low value, and you multiply it by the area. There's other things, and it tells you what's. And so developers will have to do their baseline calculation. So when they do an environmental ecological impact assessment before the planning application goes in, they will calculate that baseline. I understand each planning application will now have to include a biodiversity net gain report, and and then they will have calculated how their plans will add that 10%.
And will we provide very clear guidance? Because I think it's a good thing, but we want to make it easy for people to comply with, rather than add a whole load of planning applications already complicated things. So how are we going to make it easy for people to comply with that?
Well, the legislation has several things that will have to be included. So it has to be held in public register, it has to be maintained for at least 30 years. So those costings will need to be included into, I I assume pass on to developers in the planning application.
Yeah.
We will be building up a sort of portfolio of case studies and advice.
So we'll
Obviously,
say,
we've got the green infrastructure guidelines
we'll say here are 5 things that you can do, and then developers can figure, well, 2 and 3 I can quite easily incorporate into my scheme or something
I
like
don't
that.
know that we're necessarily
We're
responsible
slightly,
for providing the ideas for how they do it.
Mm.
You know, there's a lot of guidelines, and like I said, Natural England's just produced a whole toolbox that can be used by LPAs, but also developers to help
Okay.
guide. So we'll definitely, you know, have all those
And some,
documents
yeah.
in the reference.
I wonder whether, particularly in SPPs, really this comes back to this other item.
Oh,
I'm conscious we've gate crashed here, and this is actually quite a big subject
Yeah.
in itself, and I don't think we know all the answers yet
Okay.
either.
Well,
Yeah.
So,
can we
I mean, I'm as
note
anxious
that
as you are that we make the rules meaningful and enforce properly without making it impossible.
Yeah, meaningful and simple.
Yeah,
Two.
absolutely.
What I will say is that I'm due to meet with the biodiversity leads from the neighbouring boroughs in a few weeks' time. It's been called by the Westminster lead, so that we can work together and work out. You know, we're still waiting for various bits of guidance as well from government. So yeah, hopefully we'll come with a concerted approach that makes things easier.
Thanks. Well, yeah, maybe we'll bring that back to.
And maybe
this year.
with a colleague from planning as well,
Yes.
because it's
Yeah.
slightly.
We'll be forming
Maybe
a
Yeah.
across the time, yeah.
Just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, just to very quickly piggyback on that, what sort of work is being done, I guess, to educate planning officers in terms of biodiversity and, you know, conditions that they can apply, because, you know, often these things come to, whether they come to committee or we don't see them, you know, things have already been set, so it'd be very good, I mean, like, just as an example, I remember we had a planning meeting a couple of months ago, and there seemed to be a lack of knowledge, for example, about swift foxes. And so obviously one doesn't know what one doesn't know. And when it comes to biodiversity, I think so we can optimise these policies that we're bringing in. It's very
Yes.
important for them, you know, not in a critical way, for them to know that there are lots of things, it's not their speciality at the end of the day. So I'd be keen to know.
Yes, so several actions in the back address that. So we'll be providing training and resources for colleagues. We received last year, as all boroughs did, a grant from government to support training and resources for biodiversity net gain initiation. So yeah, we'll
Any other questions? I heard one more on metrics. So in biodiversity it covers a number of different things, and I can see how it's quite hard to apply metrics. But how are we applying metrics to judge the success of biodiversity across the
Are we?
Yeah, so what
metrics will we
what
have to judge?
metrics will we apply? Yeah, what metrics will we
Oh,
have
I
to
see.
judge? Yes, we are improving.
Well, so things like the urban green factor, which is coverage.
Yeah.
There are other measures that have come out of the Mayor's office. So we have the green canopy cover targets. There are the wider targets of, I'm going to get this wrong, is it 20% increase in green
Oh,
30,
yeah, no,
something like that.
that's
Okay.
There are wider London targets as well that we're
Okay.
contributing to. And then things like the beast as well, by the way, number of sites that we're doing, new areas of planting and
Number of
managing all
bees.
that. Number of bees. It's funny, that's the second time that's come up today.
I mean, we haven't shared the results yet, but one of the reasons we did the borough-wide habitat survey is that is our base.
Yeah, okay.
So it was done 10 years ago. We've just finished it.
Mm.
It just hasn't been circulated. Done it. So that would be a key metric because we'll be able to see at a borough level, but also on a site-by-site level. I don't know when we're planning to do it again, whether it's 5 or 10 years.
And
Whether
that'll
we-
show animal diversity and animal numbers.
That shows habitat diversity.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and it assesses all our sink sites, so our sites
Yeah.
are important to nature conservation.
Mm.
So one of our metrics, our statutory reporting metric, is on the proportion of those that are in positive management and conservation,
Mhm.
which at the moment was, when we reported it to earlier, so I think it's 71% of them, and we have a target of 80%
Yeah.
by the duration of the current pack,
Mm.
so in 5 years.
Well, we're pulling some metrics together for this scrutiny committee in general. So it might be good to follow up with you in a couple of days. I mean, the trouble is a lot of them will not change much month to month. There'll be a greening will change a lot between summer and winter, but that's not really our fault.
And that's the
But,
problem, every 12 months isn't really
Yeah.
that meaningful.
Yeah.
You've
No,
got to
I
look at
can see
what
that.
it is.
Yeah, the statutory reporting KPI is in the widest level council reporting dashboard, but yeah, it's an annual reporting.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Well, Alice, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you to Alice, and thank you to all, and thank you for all being so enthusiastic about community gardens. We love them. If you want more, let us know.
Yes, and that's a message to all councillors. Yeah, if you can find a site for a community garden, then let them know. Right, sorry, we'll now proceed to the quality report, and yeah, apologies for making you wait on that. So item 5, isn't it? Thank you very much for bringing this report.
Would you like to say a few words before we discuss it?
Yes. So obviously we've made a very strong council commitment to get to net zero by 2030 for our internal operations and 2040 for the borough as a whole. That's obviously sort of focused on carbon emissions, but it often gets conflated with air quality, myself included. I often make the same error. One of the things we are really keen to do is obviously invest in our schools, because we thought if we could make our schools green, it's obviously positive for our young residents. But part of that is also making sure that the air they breathe is also clean. There's no point just reducing the emissions of the building. We have to make sure that the air circulating is also clean. So the report really is summarising some of the audits that we've carried out across the borough. We're planning to make sure all the schools that we take action will be inspected. It is interesting always to note exactly where the higher areas of pollution are. We're often told it's always in North Kensington. That just isn't necessarily true, and some of the documents demonstrate that. But it's also, as similar to Councillor Will, it's good to track over time exactly the improvements which are occurring across the borough. But what we are really keen to do is make sure that the improvements we implement are also being tracked. So we want to see whether a green screen has been effective. We want to check whether a school street is having the desired effects, because not one solution necessarily is appropriate for all the schools, nor are they possible. Some are obviously already very close to parks, such as Holland Park School, which comes out top for air quality, and others are on a red route. So we would have to work with TfL to bring in some of the changes that we're proposing. It gives us a very good baseline, but it is also sort of guiding us as to what measures we can put into our schools. And really, it sort of goes back to best bang for the buck. We can't do everything to everywhere. We want to do the most effective things, sort of targeted to what would have the most impact for the schools themselves. And obviously, you've got officers here that will know the technical details, but it is good to see that nitrogen dioxide in particular is dropping across the borough.
So, would you like to add anything, or should we go straight to questions?
We'll go straight for questions.
Yeah.
Probably just underlining, as Councillor Barley said, the air pollution is a big factor in human health.
Yeah.
And anything we can do in the long term positive health impacts, especially for the youngsters.
Absolutely, and I think the report made that really clear. Just what an important issue it is, as you say, for children in particular. So there's certainly work underlying.
And Becky is the expert.
Yes. Colleagues.
Yeah.
Councillor Burns.
Thanks. So on the table that you have here, it shows that suggested measures, and some of them have been implemented, some of them are already in place, and so forth. How can you ensure that, for example, children are cycling to school? How can you ensure that the families are walking rather than actually using the cars? How do you ensure that that's actually happening? You may put it around the school that this is implemented, but how do you know that it's working?
This table actually, so I apologise if it's not entirely clear, is a summary of the measures we're proposing for the schools. So the ticks, it's not that it's happened, it's that we're going to take those forward. So we'll be working with the schools to try and do a survey to see usage, to look at how many more people have changed the way they're travelling to school. So that is the idea on that side of things. It will be dialogues with schools and asking them to try and keep records.
And if nothing changes, what are your plans to push them in that direction?
Well, the schools themselves, we work with them to identify these measures rather than just saying this is what you need. So we're hoping the fact that they actively want for example, the bike and scooter storage is because currently the existing provision is totally inadequate. So it's kind of, in a way, demand-led on that aspect. But absolutely, I mean, with the best will in the world, we can't know for sure that it's going to achieve the desired effect. But hopefully this will open up a pathway for better dialogue between us and the schools to keep the motivation and awareness and interest going.
But I think just to add on that, you know, we've implemented a number of school streets. I know there's one in your ward. It does require the teachers or, you know, volunteers put out the barriers, etc. So something we could do is obviously facilitate retractable bollards that are automatic, things that would require more investment but would make it easier for the school to operate them. You know, but there's obviously a cost to those more construction.
Do we have an idea of the impact? I know it's really hard to measure, but the impact we can make. So these these measures that we've recommended, and many of them have agreed to implement, how much of a difference can that make to air quality? And are there 2 or 3 things in particular which really move the dial?
It's really hard to be able to pinpoint what had an impact. I think you can definitely appreciate a cumulative impact with a number of different measures. With one school, we're looking to install, as part of this, we're looking to install Breathe London monitors at all of these schools. And one of the schools, with the school street, we will get the monitoring before the school street begins. It will be there for a number of months before it is implemented, and then we'll be able to have it still in place, obviously, while the school street is operating. Now, I can't hand on heart tell you that monitor is going to pick up the difference, because if the weather has been particularly breezy or not, then and the pollution has come from another part of the country, it's not going to reflect the impact that particular measure is going to have. But we believe the school streets do have an impact.
Yes.
We believe that the scooter and bike storage, if you're encouraging or making it easy for staff and pupils to travel to school using active travel measures and therefore not driving, that has to have a positive impact.
And I suppose from that, you know, the change in the school versus sort of London averages as well, and has it, you know, if it was 20% worse than London average and then became 10% worse, even if, you know, weather conditions weren't as good, we would still see improvement. And
No, I was just saying, you know, obviously there's a bit of common sense that goes as well. If you can take the cars further away from the front door of the school, you can't possibly add to the air pollution. So, you know, I agree, it's going to be very hard to quantify exactly the impacts these have, but individually they're all shown to have a positive impact. Obviously, the exact number will be hard to pin down, but I think where we also can look further forward is where school streets have been really successful is actually, you know, once people have got somewhat used to the road being closed, is it actually the opportunity to say, you know what, enough of the barriers and the bollards, let's actually just pedestrianise it and make that, you know, a day round thing. That's not going to be appropriate for every street in the borough, but you know, it's certainly something that we can use as a sort of follow-up measure.
Yeah, sense. Councillor Councillor.
I just want to touch on how can we encourage our children and families to either use bikes or scooters traveling from home to school. I mean, one difficulty I know families are facing is those who live in social housing with no balcony space where they can leave their scooters, bikes. do tend to lose or maybe stolen, damaged, they won't come to the school. I mean, I have my last one in primary school, Oxford Gardens. And sometimes, I mean, those bike lanes need to be repaired. And probably there's a need for investment. When children are coming to school, they tend to lose time. You know, they're making sure that their bike or scooter is safe. And when they're leaving the school, then they got the same routine. So it'd be good to have a look at it. You know, it depends on different schools, but I know Oxford Gardens got a lot of space where they can put those rails and, you know, the spaces. So if those spaces are made available, I think that will encourage children to, some of them have expensive scooters, so they want to be locked.
A really good point. I think we do try to make sure that there are sort of railings installed in schools, but obviously it's also about where they can keep their bicycles at home. We are continually consulting on new bike hangers, which there is a big waiting list, but there's also just a mechanism of getting them out and getting them purchased that takes quite a bit of time. You know, it's very cute when you see the kids' scooters all stacked in the railings, and I hope nobody thinks that that's an opportunity to steal. But, you know, we do want to make sure that we can work with the schools to provide that provision, maybe even look at sort of offering hangers that they control the keys, that sort of thing, dedicated to the schools themselves. It's an interesting idea.
Two quick ones. Just on the measures being proposed, I'd be interested in knowing where measures sort of aren't being proposed. What the reasoning is.
It's purely sort of practicalities and the circumstance of the individual school. That's my understanding.
Okay. So things like cyclone pedestrian training, where we're not proposing it for most schools.
It's a very good question, and I would need to clarify the answer for you there.
Well, a lot of this is we can't impose it on schools. A lot of it
No.
has been conversations with the schools team as to
Yeah,
what the appetite is, and whether they've really got cycle to work schemes already in place or something like that. I don't know.
That would be the reason. I will find out there.
Yeah.
That would be great. Let's see obviously that it would be good to have it in yellow rather than as already in place.
Absolutely.
Rather than because it just looks like we're not.
Yeah, following on from that, with pedestrian crossing as well, that seems just, it should be, everywhere has a crossing, I don't understand.
Well, again, you know, each school will have its own situation, but there may be pedestrian crossings which are a little bit further away, and then it's about, you know, do you spend the additional money to have two crossings very close to each other? It's worth us looking at them all in detail again, but I think certainly around Alsfield School, I know there is a crossing very close on Brompton Road, and there are some crossing Boltons. But actually, where would you put an additional pedestrian crossing for the school itself? It's on a garden square, in effect.
I would just very quickly on things like, let's say, cycle and pedestrian training. But that's just an example. If schools are coming back and saying, for whatever reason, we don't want it, we don't want to do it. I don't want to bully schools, but I think it would be appropriate to write to the Board of Governors as well and say, here's the data on the impact air quality is having on children.
Yep.
Here's what we're recommending, please reconsider. And then, you know, let them put their name to, you know, that and say, you know, if they still want to say no, that's up to them, but they've got to take responsibility.
I've been to some schools where we've looked at school streets. Some schools simply say that resourcing is difficult. I've been to some which have requested that the council provide staff to man barriers or to provide traffic wardens to do it. And this was with a cohort of teachers and residents all asking us to do the job rather than internally. So, we have to work with the schools that want to work with us, and obviously it's easier to start with those that are very keen first because you can get them done quicker. But I agree. I think there is an element of making sure everybody who teaches with it or operates a school within this borough signs up to at least the notion of whatever could work can be implemented. And some schools necessarily can't do a school street just simply because of the location.
Yeah. But I think it's particularly notable that several of the things that have the most emphasis or nodes, cycle pedestrian training, green screen, and speed indicator devices, and flashing school signs, all things that would be pretty.
Green screens is definitely a geographical issue. The school has to have a place that's suitable for it to go. So that's the reason for that. And also at this stage, for the 5 future neighbourhood schools that we're looking at, there is only a set amount of funding, and so the schools need to prioritise where they would like to spend the money to make it work. So it doesn't take much to spend that amount of money.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And just to quickly follow on from that and sort of next steps, I would appreciate the schools in the audit so far have been focused on Village Nottingdale, have that area. How are you achieving your, say, 15 to 20?
The next steps, we have a list where the schools were prioritised based on carbon pollution data, areas of deprivation and the uptake of school meals. So that is the list we're proposing to work our way through. Resources.
This is all the boroughs.
All the state schools, yes. Because we have been under-resourced and we haven't been able to make the progress as quickly as we would have liked to, we are going to seek consultants to carry out the audits rather than do them in-house ourselves, so that we can make significantly quicker progress, and also work with that consultant to get the measures implemented, so not just come up with a whole list of proposed measures, but actually see it through to the end. So we hope that will speed us up, and this time next year I can come with a much fuller report, should that be needed.
And it's something our Green Fund can really support. That we've created this pot to try and facilitate projects that otherwise wouldn't necessarily have happened. And we have to know what we can spend, to be honest. So we need the data first.
And the 15 to 20 is based on funding, is it?
No, because it was kind of chicken and egg. We had to bid for some money from the Green Fund. That has been approved. I don't actually know for that money how many audits the consultant will deliver. So that is my estimate. It's entirely possible that we may be able to do more.
But 15 minutes, I guess that's most of our schools. That's positive. And on the, just on the funding, so I know there's a couple of figures in there. There's 16,000, I think, available, and there was 200,000 pot.
Going forward, public health, thanks to Councillor Kamali, has allocated up to £200,000 per year for the next 5 years. So that is a significant investment which will be available to the schools to implement the measures that are then identified for these audits.
And are we confident that that will be used, that they're keen enough to bid for that, and they know how to, that
they will be.
They will.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, public health obviously has to report on funding, so they have to spend it.
Yeah, that's good. No, as long as we can make it easy for them, especially the schools in the high pollution areas, then that would be great. Sorry, Councillor Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to declare that I'm a governor at one of the schools mentioned, St Cuthbert's Girls' Court, which unfortunately does have the slightly unenviable position of being at the top of table 1. I was curious to see that a Safer Streets scheme is being proposed for St Cuthbert's. We don't have to go into the details this evening, obviously, but I'm sure governors and head there would be interested to discuss how that would work. I'm assuming you're not proposing to close Warwick Road, which would be the main impact there. But that aside, I would be interested to have a separate discussion on that. Encouraging more active travel, maybe it's slightly unfair question, are you not effectively exposing children to more pollution because they'll be travelling along the same polluted roads to get to the school?
So on the first point, obviously all of these things that are proposals are not necessarily, they haven't all been worked up, and they certainly haven't been consulted on. On the second one, I suppose it's one of those things where it is about modal shift. You could make that argument that if nobody ever got out of the car, of course they get the car. But actually pollution inside of cars is terrible as well. So you can explore the idea of a clean walking route towards the school. Obviously this one, I imagine a lot will come either by bus, by foot, or the tube. And we could work with schools on actually relaying that information to the parents to say, don't walk up the Warwick Road, come through Nevern Square, come through Osgold Square, where it's much greener and much leafier. You know, it's far more sensible. I'm sure most of the parents probably already follow that sort of route mapping. But that is an interesting idea of how we could perhaps help schools sort of articulate it to parents that actually there are better ways to get there.
Clean walk to route, clean route walking to school is the key to that. To answer your question, that's what happens.
And just as a comment, I mean, it's amazing how quickly it changes. And if you have a fairly wide pavement, should walk on the inside of the pavement versus the outside of the pavement on a busy road can almost halve the level of particularly massive breathing in, which is quite amazing. But I'm sure that's all covered in the training, in the sort of safe walking training, etc. Thank you. I had a couple of other questions. So one is on businesses. So I know there's mentioned in the report about encouraging or making people aware of different types of deliveries, like cycle-based deliveries for the last mile and electric vehicles. How far have we gone, and is there more we can do in reaching out to businesses initially just for information, maybe with some information that's in the report, which has struck home with me, about how dangerous air quality is for children, and to go to those businesses, a little bit of emotional blackmail, and say, please consider switching to electric vehicles or cycle vehicles for your last mile deliveries.
I mean, this is, obviously a bit of joint working with my colleague, Councillor Rendell, on this one. I do know already that things like the bids are already trying to work on making sure that their delivery and collection vehicles are all electric. We ourselves are obviously looking at improving our waste fleet, and we service about 7% of the borough businesses anyway. So when we start going green on our bin lorries, that will clearly have a positive impact. I don't know if you've got other points on it. I think it's something we definitely can explore.
No, I'd agree. We actually did a project last year with the museums on the Cromwell Road in terms of large institutions to work with them, so to see if they could join up deliveries so there'd be fewer, if they were having a similar delivery, it didn't go on different days to each museum. And we've been working previously with an e-cargo-like firm in Laverick Road to promote that kind of delivery. And there is actually a directory produced by Cross River Partnership for the borough to show which companies already do provide last mile deliveries. So we have tried to make some inroads on that. We've never actually approached them directly to draw their attention to the impact they're having on children. So that is an interesting point.
Decisions made, and it might seem like scare tactics, but it's important. It seems like we've got all these resources, information about the impacts on children, the cargo by delivery options, electric vehicle options. So certainly, I would suggest something worth considering, a sort of information campaign out to businesses, because I assume business deliveries contribute quite significantly to.
We did actually try and engage with businesses last year when we were adopting our new air quality action plan. So we definitely tried to bring them on board with us through that process. But 12 months passes and the attention.
Colleagues will be aware that we have electric waste collection on Portobello Road now, and we have a trial e-buggy going around the borough, which has popped up on the Green Fund bid. There is more we can do, but certainly, we were also looking at, could we perhaps with our own highway maintenance switch to electric diggers and electric supplies, not only for the noise but also the pollution, and some of the technology just isn't there yet. We have to sort of give them a grid connection to dig up the road.
But broadly, we're doing our bit, which puts us morally in a better position to ask businesses to do that as well, I think. Colleagues, have a couple more. Just a couple more questions. So first one, so one of the things I wasn't sure of the report, how many of our schools that we've audited are currently not meeting the WHO guidelines for NOx and particulate matter?
Most of the borough meets the nitrogen dioxide national air quality objective.
But not
the
PM 2.5 is a very much different story. If you turn to page 6, you'll see that the majority, 2/3 of the borough, doesn't meet the WHO guideline value, but that's the 2005 guideline value. In 2021, new, more stringent guideline values were introduced for PM10 and also NO2. So at the moment, there is no commitment from the council to work towards these more stringent 2021 WHO guideline values. But it's already a challenge to do the PM 2.5.
Yeah.
So that's really where our priorities lie, because PM 2.5 is the pollutant that concerns everybody the most. There is no safe level. So the fact that it's WHO has set in 2005 the guideline value of 10, and now the new one is going to be 5. It just shows you the challenge that we have. And the NO2 value is going from 40 to 10. So if that were the case, then we would have to.
That would be almost entirely apart from NO2 then.
Yeah.
Okay.
But PM 2.5 is our biggest challenge right now.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the most effective way of, how much is it?
PM
Is it
2.5,
trees or?
there are, well, to be honest, a big source of PM 2.5 is wood burning, which I know is in the news at present. So I think it's about raising awareness of the sources of PM 2.5. But we do, as Councillor Kamali is well aware, a lot of it is transboundary. So whilst we can be responsible for our own sources, it is a wider problem.
It's H&F causing lots of trouble.
So yeah, it's wood burning, there's construction, there's
Wind.
cooking, heating, wind, yes, natural sources.
So how to deal with that?
What's that?
So how do you can't control that?
No, I mean,
Presumably there's ways of reduction.
well, green screens are only effective in a limited way. I mean, they work in ways of either deposition or dispersion, and so it's a really small contribution, and it doesn't take the pollution away per se. It just affects for the dispersion. Certainly, it has a very big impact if you're immediately the other side of it. But once you're further away from it, it's quite different. It tails off. So really, it's about stopping the source.
Right. And you said wood burning is the
Yeah.
one source.
It's a significant source, yes.
Yeah. So what, I mean, because I'm showing my ignorance here, I thought wood burning was illegal in London.
No, we are in a smoke control zone in this borough.
Yeah.
But you can burn permitted fuels on permitted appliances.
Okay.
Wood burning is not banned, but it does cause pollution.
We do investigate people with open fires still.
Yeah.
Because they're contravening that.
Okay. So that's against the rules, but there are some fuels and some. So how, just to dive into this a little bit more, how are we getting people to change the types of fuels they burn?
We are part of a London wood burning group, the council is, and they are embarking on a Pan London awareness raising campaign. They recently carried out a survey to see what people know about it now. The idea is then after the campaign there will be a further survey to see if people found out, were made aware of the campaign. We're very conscious at the moment, cost of living crisis, that for some people is their source of heating, but not for others.
Yeah. We can also check what fuels are for sale. The trade standards, trade standards check to make sure the permitted fuels, super dry wood, etc.
Yes.
Only less polluting.
Okay, that's good to know. And then, sorry, I know we've been spent a lot of time on this, but there are just a couple of other things I want to go on. You've mentioned the train line in North Kensington might be. We're not sure, but might be a significant issue.
Well, it's still running diesel trains, and our modelling indicates that line as you'll see on the map, is predicted to be a source. So we were looking to install some monitoring in the vicinity to see what we can measure. But interestingly, this week DEFRA released their environmental improvement plan, and actually they're talking about railways and diesel vehicles now. They're very much focusing on stations that are enclosed, but I would be curious to see whether or not they might be willing to extend our way and comment on the Paddington Main Line.
Yeah, well, I think that would be very interesting to explore. And you know, if it is having a big impact, we can show it. So asking them to assist us. Yeah, or that. And then final question is on private schools. So I appreciate our number one responsibility is to state schools, but private schools are still our residents, and we still care about them. Is there any sort of paid for service we can offer to private schools?
There are actually free resources through Global Action Plan that we could alert schools to should they wish to use it themselves. If we secure a consultant to carry out audits, I'm guessing potentially we can share that information with them and they can choose to carry out their own.
Yeah, well, if there is some way of engaging with them a bit more, and there might be services they're willing to pay for but don't know about. Just because it'd be good to get them improving their ability as well. So we spent quite a lot of time. Any final questions? Last question.
If I go back to that table 1, what does the colour coding actually imply? We see St Cuthbert's at the top and Holland Park School in the green, Fox, St Cuthbert's and Holland Park. There's someone looking at that, my first glance was Scotch, is there fresh air outside Holland Park?
So it's a combination. It's the combination of where the pollutant is modelled to be high, where the indices of multiple deprivation are higher, and the rates of free school meal uptake. So it's a combination that's been worked out with the public health team, or in consultation with public health.
Yeah, I think maybe the colour coding type.
Yeah, that was yes, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Yes, fresh air outside.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. It's a really, really enlightening paper and likewise discussion. So thank you for doing that. So makes it.
Thank you.
Right. So we now move on to agenda item number 6. British Summertime Licensing. The Heartlet Dining.
No, anyway. My name is James Capool, Transport Planning Manager.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the paper and thank you for joining us. Would you or Councillor Connolly like to introduce?
Yeah, happily. I mean, alfresco is something that I think this borough has perhaps been the most supportive across London of. It was a great shame when I saw Soho return to the streets. It was a great shame when Northcote Road has had its alfresco removed. I thought these were really good, positive things to build communities and actually encourage spending in our shops, but also get people to dwell, spend time in our fantastic places. And alfresco, I think, has been very well received by residents. It certainly happened at pace, and I thank officers for the amount of work in licensing all of these premises within the required sort of 7-day turnaround, which was absolutely incredible, given I think it was about 140, 150 visitors that took part. We're really keen to bed this in for the long term, and currently pavement licenses are with government. They're being continually discussed and will come through in the Levelling Up Bill. But what we want to do is make sure that whatever national government does, whoever they may be, that Kensington and Chelsea supports alfresco long into the future. Part of the issues that we sort of discovered in doing so is obviously what did happen at pace. We wanted to make sure that we were as flexible to businesses as possible. But that did come at sort of quite a large officer resource in time, which of course means cost, but also in the sort of the opportunity cost of what that land, as it is, could be doing otherwise. So we've sort of reflected on it. We've heard from residents that they felt that some businesses perhaps were benefiting too greatly from a simply £100 fee. Some businesses aren't able to take part in it simply because of their location. And there's an element of sort of unfairness built into the system. And what we really wanted to do was make sure that businesses which are benefiting are at least contributing towards some of the council costs that we incur. The intent is towards cost recovery, but I believe this will still be a large loss-making exercise for the council. A loss that I think we're all happy to bear, but given the financial situations we're in, we have to be careful with taxpayers' money. But what it would also do is make sure that we have the mechanism in place that into the future, whether we return to tables and chairs licensing or whether we continue with pavement licenses at a higher rate, KNC will be able to continue to create pavement on the carriageway outside of business premises and continue to serve the communities. So that's something.
Thank you very much. Would add anything? It's cool.
No, I think Jem has covered it. I mean, the reason we're sitting here today is that this is a new fee that we're proposing, so we felt it wasn't appropriate to include in the general fees and charges paper. Additionally, the standard fees and charges, the increases, they all come in from 1st of April, but we intend to start levying these fees from the end of this month, once we've gone through governance. So that's the reason why we'd have to take an executive decision on introducing fees for this particular service.
Yeah, and I'll remind members that this paper is not just for general comment, but also for specific comments on that point in introducing fees. Part of your opinion on that. Councillor Rossi.
Sorry, how long is the licensing period?
Under the key decision, which we approved as council early 2022, so just about 12 months ago, the council agreed that from henceforth we will license additional summertime terraces on footway extensions for the period of British summertime. So that's from late March to late October.
That's the first thing, but how long is the license valid if they apply? Just every year they have to renew?
Well, every year they'll have to apply again. At the moment, under the current regulations, the regulations seem to change from year to year, but as we sit here today, we're only able to issue licenses until the 30th of September 2023. Now, there is a bill in Parliament called the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, and that proposes 2-year licenses. So if that's in place, if that's say enacted, say this summer, then next year in February, what we would probably do is we would issue licenses that would cover 2 seasons. That would still to be agreed. There might be a further executive decision next year, but for the time being, that's what we're thinking of. That we would issue a license that would cover 2 seasons, as is would be permitted under that proposed legislation.
And then would we charge them each year, or would we charge double up front?
So the way we've devised it, which is on cost recovery, is that there's different aspects. There's obviously the implementation fee, which is suspending the bays, putting out the cones. So we'd have to do that again in a second or subsequent year because we cancel suspensions for the winter. So yes, a lot of those fees would be levied every year. If there is a degree of assessment, which there would be in terms of scoping out and looking at the safety aspects, it might be that that's a one-off. But the bulk of the cost, given the monitoring, would be incurred every year.
Okay.
So the cost for an application would be 500.
So we don't call it an application. It's sort of an implementation fee, which is we would arrange the parking suspensions and putting out the cones and everything. So if we are minded to create a temporary footway extension, we would then charge them an implementation fee.
So just to make sure I'm clear on this, so I know discussions have been had about the idea we are providing a piece of real estate, public real estate, but we can't rent that out because we have to redefine it as a pavement or.
So we as Highway Authority do not necessarily own any of this land at all. We as Highway Authority are custodians and we act in the public interest to make sure people can pass over the highway and that the highway, you know, is, we basically, you know, regulate, you know, how access to the highway is achieved, safety, etc. So we cannot, it's not rateable property that we can lease out. So as Highway Authority, we can distinguish what is footway and what is carriageway. So normally we provide curbs, or an exhibition road, we provide corridor paving. For the purposes of this initiative, what we do is we suspend parking bays or give yellow line dispensations and provide traffic cones. And we, as Traffic Authority and Highway Authorities, then designate this as additional footway area. You know, we've had this checked by council, and it is.
I think it's worth pointing out we're obviously a bit at the vanguard of this. We're the borough that's pushing hardest to bed this in for the future. So we are having to sort of plot our own course somewhat, and hopefully other boroughs will be able to follow our initiatives to actually make sure this works across London. It is pretty complicated. I confess that the issue really is that we don't have pavements everywhere. They're very narrow, and that's why we've historically had tables and chairs licensing to limit the width that businesses are able to use. We're creating that width in effect now, and that does require pavement parking suspensions. It does require making sure safety checks to make sure the road you can tolerate al fresco. But it also means that, you know, a resident has lost a parking day or a business is unable to visit because that pay by phone is not there anymore. It's a balance, and there's a tension inherent in all of this because we have such limited road space.
Yeah, that's understood. And will we, so with sort of sticking on the costs or the charges, so I understand it has to be cost recovery, but there might be additional costs. And I think it's an important point. We're not being anti-business. In fact, this whole policy, I think, is very pro-business. But it's about value for money for the taxpayer, and actually, you know, these al fresco areas will ultimately feed back more to the landlord in many ways than the business, because they know they'll be able to rent their property that has the al fresco space for more money. So I think it is right that we recoup all our costs. If after year one will we do some sort of analysis to see how much it costs us, and if it's actually costing us more than we recovered, will we be able to raise the fees for next year?
I think that's a reasonable request, that we should at least audit what we've done at the end of the year, and I think we would be expected to do that under the legislation. It says that, you know, we are supposed to only let the costs for cost recovery basis.
I agree. I mean, I think the fact, because these businesses would obviously recover those costs. The licensing will probably within a night or even within a day, if you think about it. But the money is being spent public as well, whatever you recover. So I guess.
Yeah, one of the difficulties obviously was that you're unable to pick and choose between what type of business. So, you know, whilst yes, that's probably true for some of our very popular sort of alcohol licensed premises, it may be that much more difficult for someone that just sells coffee and sandwiches, you know. So yes, it's cost recovery, but there's also that sort of understanding that there's still going to be a slight inherent unfairness in it.
Which is difficult. Sorry to interrupt. Is there that was my follow-on. Would you ever consider doing a case by case? For example, High Street is obviously more likely to make more money, whereas a little side street cafe perhaps not. Would you ever do it like that?
Legal side of it.
Yeah, but the thing is, what we're doing is we're temporarily extending footways. So we're doing that blind to how the footways might potentially be used. So it might be that it's used by a highly profitable business, it might be that it's not. But we have to be blind to that. The cost is about the cost of temporarily extending the footway. We are blind to how it would be potentially used.
Even in locations like a high street is a heavy traffic.
Under our guidance, generally, so the main arterial routes like Kensington High Street, Notting Hill Gate, etc., none of them have these things anyway, because they wouldn't be safe and it's just not appropriate. So we do have guidance, which means that most of them are on relatively quiet streets. I'd say the busiest street that has these temporary terraces is Westbourne Grove. Yes.
And in terms of timing, if a place has it late at night, which is more likely to be places with an alcohol licence, is there any increased cost to monitoring and safety and enforcement? So we could say if you have it beyond 6 p.m, you have to pay an extra fee.
So the temporary footway extensions will be there 24/7 for
Yeah.
the period of British summertime, and that will be the case regardless of the type of business that's using it. You are correct, obviously, in terms of the payment licensing aspect that busy pubs, say, incur far more costs on the council than a coffee shop. That is a different matter, and that's covered under different legislation. But so the Business and Planning Act 2020, which was devised to be as a fast track, business friendly licensing process, doesn't allow the local authorities to recover monetary costs. And it might be that when the Levelling Up Regeneration Bill is finally enacted, maybe there'll be an element of that. Who knows? But for the time being, we are unable to charge for that.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a representation we can make to central government, but that's worth considering.
And this has been part of the issue in that we haven't had that certainty of exactly what national guidance is going to be. So we're having to find the mechanism so that even if pavement licenses were to fall away as an offer, we would still be able to create pavement and then offer tables and chairs licensing upon it. So the policy can live on regardless of national guidance. But yes, that individual point obviously is something that could be improved in legislation.
Councillor Green,
I'm going to talk about design.
Me too.
Okay. Yeah, my interest in oil design, I'm going to be honest. So I welcome many parts of policy in terms of adding greenery and banning plastic sheeting, etc. I'd be interested for us to explore what scope there is to, as part of this, we're net zero, very pro sustainability and greening. What scope there is to, some businesses have unsustainable plastic things put outside the stores. What, as part of the applying to have this, what conditions can we be putting so they have to remove anything like that might be unsustainable?
So are you referring to actually
on the facade of the building rather than the
facade of the building, like plastic flowers and
on the facade of the building. Well, that would be planning enforcement, but then the question is whether it's development. It's a tricky issue. The plastic flowers of buildings. There's been one or two examples that have been problematic.
Yeah, but as part of this, can we say you get? I mean, because obviously I know here we're always put conditions on to say you've got to let everyone use your loo, which seems far more intrusive than a condition saying you've got to take off the plastic outside the building.
Yes.
Well, the loos were actually in response to one of the previous scrutiny committee meetings where we were looking at public provision across the borough.
If it's possible to put
certainly
it's possible to put a condition saying you've got to allow everybody into your loo.
It's a condition that's anti-plastic, and if we don't have one already, I'm surprised. I'll have a little look.
There is on actually on the terrace. So it's part of the design number 2. Second paragraph. Plastic sheeting, plastic screens should not be used on to sheet summertime terraces in the street. But my point is, can we tighten that and look at a condition to, we'll say we'll give you the terrace if you take away this plastic unsustainable.
I see. So most premises don't have plastic tap on them. So what we do is because it's a very fast track process. We've only got 1 week consultation and then 1 week to determine. We basically put the same standard set of conditions on every single one. And most conditions are applicable to most, licenses.
So
but that one seems very specific.
If you have a condition that is part of it, it's same with the loo condition. The blanket condition can't have any plastic attached to your facade.
I just think that's probably overreach, perhaps, Because
More than saying you've got to let everybody into your loo.
well,
I think
this
it's
is
far
a
more
question.
intrusive to me than just saying I give a bit of a facelift to your front of your building.
We could probably debate it offline.
Well, we have a, obviously we have to check any conditions that we put on are judged to be reasonable, you know, in legal terms. So we'll take that away. But obviously we're talking about a licensed area, which comes with a license use. The license use involves people eating and drinking, which they'll potentially use facilities inside the premises. So Councillor Kamali considered that there will be public benefit, in the businesses that are getting the benefit of paid licenses, also being available for the public to use their facilities.
It's very good. I'll just add, so very good to see that in there.
But in the same way, there's it's public benefit for the churches not to have plastic and to have greenery. Presumably, it's also a benefit to not on the facade to have this.
Well,
if
why
we just
don't
take that
you
away and let that plug
take that one away?
What can we do?
And it might be that something can be done for a different regime than this one, if it can't be done through this one.
More in general, I'd be very keen to do all we can to tighten up the design principles to make sure that as much as possible it is there are improvements, they look good. I'd be keen to see if we can do something to prevent this is just potential no political slogans or anything being put on them, if we can do some sort of ban like that. So
Okay, I don't believe we've had them for 3 years. I don't believe I've ever seen a political slogan.
Until people do think, why do they want to change it?
I don't know why you don't want your local businesses supporting you, Roberto. Very interesting.
If you've got political slogans or flags, anything like that, I think it's important to keep them neutral. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, okay. I think that should be fine. I mean, it's not an issue we've encountered.
Just to preempt some of these things.
We could perhaps modify the advertising line to include other natures.
Perhaps we can have like an example, like 3 examples of a good standard of what the outside space should look like, and then there's sort of guidelines to follow. That was my...
Exactly, and I think we have to remember, when this all started, the government was instructing us to eat and drink outside, and of course it was cold an awful lot of the time, and businesses unsurprisingly wanted to enclose their areas as much as possible, even though of course we were meant to be outside as much as possible. We want this to stay, and one of the big criticisms we had was around the plastic sheeting, sort of the enclosure. It's not meant to be part of the inside of the restaurant. This is meant to be in addition to my colleague used the 21st arrondissement as his justification for it, but it's actually more about it's al fresco. That's literally the name. It is not about creating more internal premises on the street.
And just following on from that, going to the heating, heating, for example, being warm. Are there any sort of implementations or ideas to make sure it's sort of slightly more eco-friendly in its heating?
Well, currently we don't allow heating at all.
At all.
I'm aware a number of businesses do occasionally heat their premises.
Yeah.
So we don't license heaters, but a number of businesses obviously do use heaters.
Yeah.
Hitherto, particularly because it was post-pandemic, people were encouraged to eat outdoors. We're trying to support businesses. I mean, we didn't force against the presence of those heaters.
I think we just have to be pragmatic on these things. We're not going to license it. We want businesses to be as green as possible, avoiding plastic wherever possible. We want to facilitate businesses to survive and strive.
So maybe a good practice kind of little examples, so you get the examples of what are acceptable, so they'd be accepted, and they don't need to.
The guide to the rear has the management principles, it has the design principles. I think this year will also be a good example for us to see what's worked again. This will be the first year, hopefully, where COVID doesn't present the same challenges. And it will mean we can see, actually, do they need more protection? Do they need more open, fewer plants, pots, etc. And the flexibility of creating something for the long haul is that we can review it. Keep changing.
Well, I certainly agree with Councillor Burns' point in terms of making it easy for people. As you said, we've got the design principles, and there are some photos in there. But I'm sure if I were a business owner, I'd really appreciate having, 3-4 examples and saying, look, if you apply for this, that'll be fine. That makes my life easier, and also makes it more likely people are going to put up appropriate looking things. On the heaters point, I mean, I can see your point of saying, we just don't, we sort of don't talk about it very much, and we deal with it case by case. But there could be an argument for saying we could proactively go and say electric heaters are fine, but gas are not, and the gas are normally freestanding ones anyway, and that's better for the environment and also less visually obtrusive. So, and that's worth considering.
I think the policy will remain that we don't encourage heating the outside, but what we want to do is sort of, we want to see how it goes. Our council officers we want these businesses to do well, so we have to just see it in practice and see if there really is that need and that demand. We could have a fantastically warm summer, excessively warm like last summer perhaps, or it could be dreadful, and then we're going to have to make a judgment.
Well, the infrared heaters are a lot better than gas
for
the environment. That's the only reason I mentioned it. Councillor
Do
Derrick.
we have a condition on waste management as well?
Yes, there is, yeah.
Over it.
Yeah, well, I'll read it out to you if you want, but yeah.
And actually, it should be said, we're also going to be working with businesses to try and encourage them. When the fees and charges come out in April, we'll be able to offer the service of additional jet washing, for a fee. So if they do want to wash down their areas professionally, our teams will be able to cater for that as part of our sort of commercial waste offer as well.
Yeah, condition 18 on page 73 of the bundle is the condition related to waste.
Very quickly on greening, I mean, what do we do in terms, obviously the licensing period is quite long. It's great that they give us greening proposals, but what do we do in terms of, I think we know, particularly, example similar to, for example, subs, where they can by the end of the year start to look a bit sad and tired. What do we do by way of making sure they keep it looking green and lush throughout the year?
I think in our experience, the privately managed, any ones that had plants, now most of them didn't, some of them had green tack, as the plastic stuff, but some of them did have plants. And it's in their commercial interest to keep the plants looking nice and fresh. So any plants that were provided by restaurants or bars generally looked quite well. I mean, there's a few council planters at the end of the streets that didn't look so good. But yeah.
Yes, we'll take that away. But license condition 25, all plants specified in the submitted greening plan should be actively maintained and replanted as necessary.
Fantastic. And then it's just about staying on top of them, isn't it? On
for the record, I just clarify. This is indicative guidance from last year, and this was written potentially to deal with the situation where the pavement licensing was no longer in place. So because pavement licensing is such a fast track process, and we may not be able, well, it's highly unlikely we'll be able to assess, the greening plan within the week. But certainly, our objective is clear that we want them to be as quickly as possible.
As long as we tag the objective, the condition on there, they've got responsibility to maintain it. So a couple of other things on design. Do we envisage any issues with businesses putting up their tables and chairs at the end of the day and putting them against the front of the business, and particularly if they're a restaurant that's only open in the evening, they could be there not quite cluttering, but visually cluttering the street all day. So if they fold away their tables and chairs, and I know some cafes do it that just have the tables and chairs directly outside. Normally it's not too obtrusive, but if a restaurant putting those tables up against the restaurant all day long until 5 o'clock, that might not look great.
Does it come down to whether they're in the frontage?
Yes. It comes down to a lot of businesses. So I think when you've got the temporary footway extensions, it actually makes things easier, because after 10 p.m. when they're no longer supposed to be used, they're almost a de facto place to put things that is slightly out of the way.
Yeah.
And a lot of restaurants, you know, they use every square inch of their space inside, you know, because obviously, you know, the space is valuable. Whereas we might only issue a license for tables and chairs outside until 10 p.m. We ask them to put them out of use. Generally, in many cases, they can't be brought inside until the interior of the restaurant has been cleared from customers, which is often, say, around midnight.
Yeah.
So you are right, often there are tables and chairs in a pile for the 2 hours between the end of the licensing hours for tables and chairs and the closing time of the premises.
But then they will be brought inside at midnight.
Yes, and most ones that are on the footway, you know, that we've had for years have always been brought in at the end of the evening, and that has been required. We became a bit more flexible during the pandemic when it came to these additional footway areas, footway extensions, because it's additional furniture which previously they wouldn't have had to accommodate, and if they're locked up in a you know, obviously in as attractive way as possible, such that locked up furniture can be, but it is out of the way. It's not causing a trip hazard. We did allow some people to keep this stuff out on the street.
I think that's just one probably to keep an eye on, and if it's causing a problem, something that could be revisited. I just sort of think could potentially be an issue where a lot of restaurants end up storing it outside and it's there all morning.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
Understood.
And then on the decking is being permitted. I take it.
Well, we would. It is being permitted because some restaurants, you know, if you're having a meal, you need to eat it on the level, and there's the camber of the road. The thing is, in 2020 and 2021, when decking was first introduced, suddenly, as you know, a huge superstructure started coming with it. Because obviously the decking provides a base from which things can grow. So, yeah, we have to be a little bit careful with that.
We've got to be conscious. Businesses did invest in the alfresco stuff in the years gone by as well. So ideally, as Italian family, I know, you know, when you go to Italy, often the chairs are slightly crooked on the pavement, and you manage, and you put a bit of paper on the chair leg and the table leg. It, you know, in an ideal world, that's exactly where we would want to get to. But a number of businesses did spend good money on level surfaces. We're going to have to be a little bit flexible. But
yes. So I think, yeah, exactly. So we are trying to discourage it, but at the same time, we do ask for businesses to provide barriers to protect the licensed area from, you know, moving traffic, which is reasonable enough. And, you know, we don't want the barriers falling all over the place. So actually, the decks do have benefits in that regard. So I'm thinking particularly, say, at Westbourne Grove, for example, where you absolutely do need to have a reasonable barrier. So deck does provide a base for that. But a quieter road, you know, perhaps even, you know, Thankby Street or, you know, quieter locations, perhaps is not absolutely necessary for safety reasons.
But it's also about uniformity as well, you know. Or if it is required for safety reasons, we don't want them all painted in different colours, etc. when you look at them. So I think what we just have to slightly see how we go. The policy here is really about the charging mechanism, not about necessarily the principle of alfresco. I think we all support the principle. We have to be flexible and work with our businesses. And actually the British summertime means we actually have a winter in which we can engage with them and say, look, this didn't quite work. Could you please resolve it for next season? Rather than giving a 20-year permanent planning permission or something like that, where then, you know, we're stuck with those products.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just to be careful with that. I'm very pro decking. I think it's not actually particularly pleasant to sit in the gutter. And so it's much nicer to be, you know, on a raised platform, particularly, you know, unless the road is, as you were saying before, level with a footway. To have that sudden drop is not particularly appealing. And having seen other boroughs do, you know, put a few chairs in the gutter, I don't think it's particularly attractive.
Ours are very well maintained. Though.
We have particularly very nice graders. But yeah, your point is taken. The reason why we're slightly anti-decking is just from a highway authority perspective. If for whatever reason a utility needs to get access to the road surface, it can be quite difficult to do.
There's also a slight hygiene issue as well occasionally. You know, like they certainly weren't cleaning underneath the decking throughout the summers as well. So it's a managed approach. You know, we want some flexibility. We want to just make sure that they are
Well, it
able
could,
to adapt.
I mean, it could be in years in the future, we might go for a 12-month a year alfresco policy, in which case we could extend out the pavement and no longer be an issue. But,
Exactly. I think when the pavement's extended out, well, then it's just a standard license where we have everywhere else. Yeah.
Colleagues, any other questions on that? No, I mean, I'll summarise my views, and please tell me if anyone disagrees on the particular points of charges. Certainly supportive of that in principle, and you know the amounts have been arrived at through a proper process. So it's hard to disagree with them, but again supportive of reviewing at the end of the season what our true costs were, and if they were higher, making sure that that is reflected in next year's fees. And everyone's broadly happy with that?
Yeah.
I think about this design.
Yes. Okay, well, with that, I think that brings an end to the agenda item, which is the final substantive agenda item. Yeah. Thank you very much for the paper and for discussing it with us this evening. We're all very excited about what's happening in alfresco. So that then brings us on to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Losing my place here. Work programme.
Yeah,
Here we go, agenda item 8. Select committee work programme. Any comments on the work programme? Obviously we've moved from this meeting to next meeting in the update on the flood working group report. So we've got a very busy meeting, a lot of good stuff in the next meeting in April. Any thoughts, comments? Too late for the speeches, so I won't invite those. Okay, very good. And there's nothing else, is there? No, well, that brings us to the end. So I declare this meeting closed. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We just need to catch up.